Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. Before we get started, I have two things I have to mention. One, I am developing a bit of a head cold, so I'm stuffed up. Now I am high on Sudafed right now, and very congested, which you can probably tell by my voice. And you're going to see me coughing and choking and spitting and blowing my nose, and I apologize for that, but I'm not going to stop my videos. I'm just going to keep going, so trigger warning, I suppose. You know. That being said, the second thing I have to point out is I'm in a dead zone, for all intents and purposes, with my internet. Long story short, we used up our data for the month. And I'm in the process of getting fiber optic hooked up next week, but it won't be till next Thursday. So I have to rely on my cell phone hotspot in order to upload videos, and I don't have enough data on my hotspot to be able to do so, so it's slow going. So I'm recording these videos on Thursday, but they're not going to all be uploaded until probably Friday or even Saturday, so bear with me. Alright, that's the long and short of it. Let's get into this video. Journalists in movies and television. Alright, so you have some famous journalists, but you also have journalists depicted as a character or character arc, or type of character, or character type, in almost every movie out there, or movie series, horror movies, or action movies, or whatever. Basically, news reporters are often depicted as, 1, nosy, and 2, ambitious. A lot of times you have the reporter who says things like, "This story sucks, it's beneath me, I wish I was doing, quote, real news," or something exciting. And they're always talking about, I gotta get the scoop. I just gotta get the scoop. And then you have a lot of reporters breaking the law to, quote, get the scoop. So let's talk about what we see in films and television and how they almost universally get it wrong every time. Now, what's my point of reference? I was a journalist for 7 years. I studied journalism at university for 4 years. I have a lot of friends who are professional journalists. So I can tell you with fairly high degree of certainty what journalists are like, because I worked at multiple news outlets over multiple years, almost a decade, in several states. So I have a pretty good grasp on what a typical journalist is like. And I have to emphasize typical, because there's always exceptions, so don't come at me. And the reason why I have to say that is because the exception would justify a character being one way in a movie. But the exceptions are the norm in film and television. So let's talk about some of the things we often see in the media, in fictional media, I should say, about journalists. So let's use a few examples. I have 2 examples I'm going to use. Example number 1, I'm going to use other examples, but just to get started, we have April O'Neil from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. That's example number 1. Example number 2, I've already talked about to death in a couple of other videos, and that's Gale Weathers from the Scream franchise. So April is she's a television reporter, but it's not clear from what we see if she's an anchor or a beat reporter. It's not clear, because we see her in some appearances, some episodes of the cartoon, some issues of the comics, some of the movies. You know, we see her sitting at the desk reading the news, which is the job an anchor would have. But we also see, more often than not, her in the news van, in the field, you know, getting the scoop. This is not accurate at all. This does not happen. If you're the anchor, you do not go out into the field and get news. You do not go out in the field and report on the news. You don't do anything of the sort. You sit in the newsroom having discussions with the news editor and the producer and the assistant producer and the journalists, writing the show, planning what story is going to go where in the script, in conjunction with the producer and the assistant producer, and etc. And then when the news reporter sends in their story, you edit it for them because your job is editor. When you're, well, there's two editors. Three editors actually. Well, actually there's more than that. But the journalist writes the story and then sends it into the anchor, who edits it, rewrites it, fact checks it, etc. And then they put it in the script. They put the script into the program. And then the producer goes through and does the same thing. They fact check and ask questions. Hey, this isn't very clear. Can you give me more information? Or they spell check or whatever. So presumably by the time it airs, you've had at least three different people, sometimes 5 or 6, verify the information. However, the anchor does not take the news van and the camera and drive to the scene of the news and report live very often. Now, they can on a couple of rare exceptions. Rare exception number 1, a live newscast on location in the field. We did this at the TV station where I worked. We packed everything up and went out to the state fair, and we broadcast live the regular news broadcasts from the county fair, because this was Nebraska and people really need to know what's going on with the, cows, because their whole life revolves around cows and corn. So, that is one instance where you will see the news anchor in the field. That happens at most 5, maybe 6 times a year. Again, not the norm, but we see it all the time on television. So, that's a thing that they get wrong all the time. The second instance where you might see the news reporter, the anchor, not the reporter, the anchor in the field, is if it's a tremendously, extremely important breaking news story where you don't want to send the inexperienced MMJ. You need somebody who's got some, clout and experience behind them. For example, a bomb threat at City Hall, or a bridge collapsing, or, a mass shooting, etc. We're talking catastrophic breaking news. Yes, you're going to send the anchor in the field to make sure you don't fuck things up. Because your MMJ, who's fresh out of college, who's only been doing this job for 6 months, you can't trust them to handle catastrophic breaking news because they've never done it before. And you got to get it right, so you're not going to send the intern out in the field. You're going to send the person with the experience. So those are the only 2 instances. Again, that is very rare. Doesn't happen very often. And it has to be catastrophic breaking news. A mass shooting or bomb at City Hall. Not your normal, 30-car pileup on the freeway, send the intern. Your normal, tornado, all right, give it to the weather team, let them handle it. You know what I mean? It has to be catastrophic breaking news to send the anchor into the field. Which does happen, but it doesn't happen, it happens probably every day somewhere in the U.S., but not every day at every TV station. So when you see April O'Neil or Gale Weathers, same thing, or any television reporter as depicted in film and TV, out in the field getting the scoop when they're the anchor, that's not realistic. That doesn't happen. That never fucking happens. Not when it's just the fucking, a bank robbery. No one gives a shit about a bank robbery. Yeah, it's news, but it's give me a fucking break. That's we can send the fucking, I keep saying intern, the MMJ. You can send the fucking kid to that. You don't need to send the anchor to that, unless I don't know, the mayor was at the bank and or there's hostages or some. You know what I mean? Your normal news, you don't send the anchor. But we see them in the field every day. Now to back up for just a second. To be fair, a mass serial killer on the loose in a small town, hence Scream, yes, I can see them sending Gale Weathers to that. Because, yeah, you know what? This is a catastrophic breaking news event. But when it happens the second time, in Scream 2, or it happens a third time in Scream 3, or it happens in Scream 5. No, by then you're like, no, this has become routine. It's no longer catastrophic. It's now routine. We're not sending Gail to this story anymore. We're going to send, Tiffany because, she needs the experience. So there, like I said, that is an exception I'll allow in Scream 1, 1996, but not consistently, not regularly. They're not going to keep sending her in the field. Eventually, they're going to be like, no, you covered the breaking news when it was breaking news. Now it's a routine story. Now it's just a follow-up. Now we can send Tiffany. We don't have to send Gail anymore. Now let's go back to April O'Neil. And I'm also going to bring up Robin Sparkles from How I Met Your Mother, because she's another example of this egregiously aggressive, offensive stereotype you see in television news reporters. Every single episode of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, April O'Neil is always doing something, some kind of, it's the World's Fair, or here's the traffic report, or, it's the puppy parade, or whatever. Some kind of quote-unquote trivial news story. You see this is a focal point of the movie Bruce Almighty, which I'm going to bitch about because I hate that movie as the journalists are depicted in that movie, because it's unrealistic. The complaint is, oh my god, this isn't real news, it's beneath me, I don't want to do this. I wish I was doing real news. Journalists don't have that attitude. They don't. Most journalists at your local TV stations, which is what we're referring to in most of these cases, they're beat reporters with very little experience to begin with. If you're in the field, you're a beat reporter. Either one, you don't have a lot of experience, or two, you just like being in the field. One, you don't have a lot of experience. You're just you don't care if it's the world's biggest cookie or the puppy parade. You're just happy to be on TV. You're just happy to be getting writing credits because you're desperate for attention. You're desperate for experience. You're desperate for exposure. You're desperate to get your name out there. You're happy to do any news. You're never bitching, oh my god, why do I have to go to the fair and talk about the fucking, pink ribbon pig or whatever. No, you're just like, alright, let's do this. And then you're getting on the ground, nuzzling the pig, making oink noises, having fun. I've seen this 100 times at a dozen different markets spread throughout the country, and I know a lot of journalists, young and old, because I was a producer. I worked my way up the ladder, so I got to be a mentor to journalists. And yes, you're just happy to be doing the news because it's a fucking fun job. So no, you never have the journalist ever, oh my god, this sucks, this story's so stupid, I wish I was doing blah blah blah. No, you don't. Now sometimes you have a journalist who has a specific beat in mind. Maybe they want to be a government reporter, or they aspire to be a sportscaster at ESPN, or maybe they want to be, a political commentator like Bill O'Reilly or whatever. Okay, so a lot of journalists do have aspirations to eventually move up the ladder. That is a common trope. It is never, this story sucks, I wish I was doing real news. It is, alright, I paid my dues, now I want to sit at the desk. Now, let's go back to Robin Sparkles for a second. We do get a lot of her bitching and rolling her eyes at the news she's doing, and she refers to herself as not a real journalist because she does, quote, those fluff pieces you see at the end of the news. Except, those are the most fun stories, and here is something you don't know about journalists and news organizations. Journalists see a lot of traumatic shit. We see dead bodies on a regular basis. We see victims of sexual assault and kidnapping on a regular basis. We see victims of tornadoes and fires and natural disasters on a regular basis. Yes, you want to do the quote-unquote hard news, the breaking news, but it is mentally draining. It is tough on you. It is stressful. And it is traumatic. So every news outlet I've ever worked at does offer their journalists free therapy sessions. Usually it's like a certain number of sessions. It's like you get, 3 a year or 1 a month or something like that. But it's like, yes, you're working a very traumatic job. You need some, you need these fluffy stories to let your brain decompress. On Monday, you're covering school shooting and you're taking photographs of, third graders with bullets in their bodies. On Tuesday, you're happy, ecstatic to be at the puppy parade downtown at the puppy park. You're like, thank God I get a break from what I just went through yesterday. So that is actually what really happens in real journalism. What you see on TV is journalists like, no, I want to be at the bank robberies and the tornadoes every day. No, you don't. Because your brain can't handle it. Because it's too fucking traumatic. Yes, unfortunately, there are times where you don't have a choice. You have to cover breaking news. And sometimes breaking news is very depressing and miserable and traumatic. And, it's going to trigger things and PTSD, etc. That's going to happen. That's unavoidable. They teach you that day one of journalism school. That's the first thing they teach you. This job is going to fuck you up. Make sure you can handle it before you go forward. That is literally day one of Journalism 101. That's the first lesson your professor gives before they even tell you what a newspaper is. Because if you don't have the mental fortitude to handle the job, you have no business going into that field. So no, it is not very realistic for you to have journalists who are complaining about the so-called fluff pieces. Because one, those are usually fun stories anyways. Two, you need the experience, the exposure you're happy to get. And three, sometimes you just need a break from the shit. You just need an easy, fun story. And I know this as someone, during my time as a journalist, I covered a murder trial where the mother starved her 12-year-old son to death, and I had to sit in that courtroom and look at pictures of what was left of his body. Because it ate itself as he starved to death. Those are images I can't get out of my head. Yeah, I went that day, Thursday, whatever, did that, and the next day I was like, give me something light, please. I was begging my editor, please, give me something light today. I need to go to, the local grade school and do a story on these third graders that are learning computer programming, or the college and do a story on, the local esports team, or just something to make me forget about what I just saw yesterday. Because that shit is real. It fucking happens. Now, the other thing you see is you have journalists who are overly ambitious, who are, we'll go back to Bruce Almighty, jealous of other journalists. Now, this does happen. Yes, it does. But not usually how you see it on film. What you see in, example, Bruce Almighty, they have an anchor position coming up. Bruce thinks he's got the experience and the longevity, etc., etc., etc. He deserves this job. So what we see in the film is when he doesn't get it, he becomes bitter and enraged with jealousy and more or less sabotages the guy who did get the anchor position instead of congratulating them. That doesn't usually happen. Here's what usually happens. By the way, the career path to anchor isn't what you see on TV. So let's go down the how do you become an anchor? Let's do that first. Because Bruce had no business expecting he was going to get anchor when he was doing fluff stories. Why? Well, so here's how you become an anchor. One, you do the beat job, and you do it well for however much time it takes before your boss trusts you to do the fill-in anchor. What is fill-in anchor? Well, I'm glad you asked. Fill-in is when it's Christmas, December 25th. The big anchor who makes $150,000 a year and has a poster and billboards and their face spread throughout town, the celebrity, basically, the star of the show, has Christmas Day off. So who works Christmas Day? The fucking intern. The inexperienced reporter who's never done, never done this job for more than a few months. You get the fill-in. Basically, that means you're going to sit and read one of the newscasts on Christmas Day, because somebody has to sit at the desk and read, and your producer is going to take it easy on you. You're going to get a lot of fluffy Christmas stories. You're going to cover breaking news if it happens, because it does. Shit happens. You can't avoid it. But you're going to do your best the producer is going to do their best to have, if there is breaking news, they're going to have a beat reporter live on location, covering on location, so that the inexperienced beat journalist who's pretending to be anchor for a day doesn't get overwhelmed with covering with this tragedy or whatever it is. The beat reporter's live. So the anchor basically just has to say, all right, and now over downtown there's a bank robbery. We're going to go to Joe in the field. And then they just toss to Joe, and Joe does the story. And then it comes back to the anchor, and they're like, all right, in other news, Kmart stocks are down again, etc. Then you move on. You do this throughout, the next, year or two. You fill in until you've filled in enough times, and you wait for an opening in either one of the newscasts that they don't care about. Maybe it's one of the, you have your satellite channel. You got your main channel, and then you got your satellite channel, which is the channel nobody watches. But because of FEC regulations and consolidation, etc., your main channel is ABC, but you also own the CW affiliate. So you have like a newscast at 7 o'clock on the CW nobody watches. So you need an anchor for that job, that newscast. You might be able to squeeze somebody in there with very little experience. Or the weekend anchor. You're going to get the weekend anchor. The Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday and Sunday, you're sitting at the desk, you're news anchor. But the rest of the week, you're just a normal beat reporter, occasionally filling in as needed if somebody takes a vacation or a day off or whatever, and it's your turn to sit at the desk, because they do take turns. So, you do that until you have enough experience anchoring, and then when an anchor job becomes available and you apply for it, because you do have to apply for it, you have to interview for it, just like any other job. And you audition for it, because you do have to actually audition for it. And if they decide you're the best for the job, you get it. Now, what we see in Bruce Almighty, which is the reason why it pisses me off that he's such a bitch about it, is he's a beat reporter. Now, we do not and cannot assume he has no anchor experience. We can't make that assumption, but we can assume, based on the comments he makes in the film, we can assume two things. One, he didn't ask for it. He just assumed they were going to give it to him. And two, he's never sat at the desk. We can make this assumption based on the way he bitches about doing these fluffy news stories, which means he's not even doing breaking news. He's not even doing hard news, which tells us two things about him. One, he's either inexperienced, so he does not have the clout to apply for the anchor job because he doesn't have the experience, so he just needs to shut the fuck up and do the job for another 2 or 3 years and pay his dues. Or two, he sucks at the job, doesn't take it seriously, and they're not going to make him anchor because they can't trust him, which we see evidence of this in the film. Now, I would say 99.9999999% of news reporters are going to do how I just described it. The infinitesimal percentage, the 1 out of a billion, we'll say, who is going to be the little bitch like Bruce Almighty, no, they're not going to get mad and sabotage their coworker. What they're going to do is quit their job, and then move across country and go take an anchor position at a smaller market that has less, smaller audience, less experience needed. They just want someone to sit at the desk. Oh, you've read the news for 3 years? All right, you're qualified to sit at the desk. So that's how that works. Another thing we see in television news reporters and journalism, and we're going to sidestep from television for a second, and we're going to go into newspapers. A lot of times you see newspaper journalists, you have the stereotypical nosy reporter. The TV reporter is not usually depicted as such because they're usually standing outside City Hall telling you what they see. That is pretty accurate for the most part. But the newspaper reporter is breaking into warehouses or sneaking into record rooms in City Hall or police stations or whatever, basically breaking the law to get the scoop. Let me tell you right now, that doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen is because if you do those things, you go to jail, because those are illegal. You have certain legal protections, freedom of the press, that average citizens don't have, which we can talk about in another video. But you don't have the right to deceive, to obtain information, and you don't have the right to break and enter, or to steal information. So, if you suspect that there's a doctor at your local hospital, I don't know, we'll go back to Misery for a second, the film Misery, murdering babies in the ICU, and you can't get the hospital to let you come in and set up a hidden camera to photograph the ICU to do an investigative undercover report to prove that this person is doing bad things, and you break in on the weekend and set up a hidden camera anyways, that evidence is not admissible in court. You're going to jail, and they are going to lawyer up, and guess who gets sued? You and your employer, and who's out of job? You are. So don't do that. That doesn't happen. Let's say you have, I don't know, a politician, city council member, mayor, I don't know, city planner, somebody who you suspect of corruption or whatever. Then what you do, investigative journalism, what you do is, one, you ask them point blank, hey, we've got this tip that you're being accused of X, what do you have to say for yourself? That's the first thing you do. You literally just ask them, hey, what's your explanation? They're saying you're doing this, and here's their evidence. What do you have to say for yourself? And then you ask follow-up questions as needed. If you're still not satisfied, or maybe they're shady, or they're shifty, or whatever, or you have evidence that has been illegally obtained through a source, and you're going to use that source as a jumping-off point, but you're not going to cite them because you can't. But you're going to say, all right, you've got this evidence obtained illegally. I can't use it, but I can see it with my eyes and I can know something's going on. How do I get this same evidence legally? All right, so this is what you do. One, in the case of city council or city planning, you go to the meetings and you just, you attend the meetings and you observe them and you see for yourself, how are they voting? What are they saying? You record them. What are they saying in the meetings? What are they actually doing? What types of, city ordinances or city zoning changes are they, authorizing or introducing or backing or supporting or whatever. So you do that, you gather information. And then if you see any potential discrepancies, maybe they're reporting X amount of dollars goes into the library fund, but you're looking at the we'll say illegally obtained information that suggests that they're siphoning money into, I don't know, the police department for bulletproof vests or whatever. Whatever. We'll just use this as a hypothetical. All right, how do you prove that? Well, like I said, you ask the city council or the chief or whoever, and they're going to deny it, obviously. You go to the meetings and you start you start just looking for you start investigating. And then you ask for records. You do what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. You say, all right, I need, the accusation is the library is allocated $95,000. The accusation is that $95,000 isn't going to the library. It's going to the police department, and the library's not getting their money. Show me the records. Now, if there is something shady, they're going to say no. And they're going to file an injunction with the state attorney general's office. At which point, you have to file an appeal with the state attorney general's office saying, look, this is in violation of the Freedom of Information Act. They have to provide me this information. And then the Attorney General sends them a letter saying, yeah, you have to give them the information. Here's the deadline to provide it. Here's the information they're requesting. Get on top of it or face penalties. And it's criminal penalties. So, yeah, you don't want to violate that if you want to keep your job or not go to prison if you're a city council member or city clerk or whatever, because that's a no-no. You don't do that. You do. I mean, shit. I mean, criminals are criminals. They're going to criminal. But, I mean, you know what I mean. If you're going to do it, cover it up better. But anyway, so now you have the financial reports. Now you, all right, according to the financial reports, the library bank account says that it did not receive the $95,000. But as I'm looking through, here's a line item in the police department that says emergency funds $95,000. All right, I may have found my $95,000. Now with this evidence, you can do three things. One, go back to your editor, present them the evidence, and say, do we run the story yet, or do we get confirmation? Your editor is going to say, let's get some confirmation first. Or, you know what? Let's turn up the heat. So, scenario A, let's get confirmation first. You schedule a meeting with whoever you trust in the department or city council or whatever, and say, look, here's the information I have. Here's my evidence. Here's the accusation. Here's my evidence supporting the accusation. What do you have to say for yourself? But you don't go to the person being accused. That's stupid. You don't do that. You've already asked them. They've already denied it. You've already got their denial. You don't go back to them. You go to their boss or someone else. So if it's city council member A, you don't go back to city council member A. You go to the mayor, or you go to the city manager or somebody else in the city, and you say, look, I need your help. And then whoever you went to, your trusted source, is going to go talk to them and say, look, they caught you red-handed. Let's open our own internal investigation. And then most likely what will happen is the city opens an internal investigation, and they're going to reprimand whoever that person was, fire them, or dock their pay, or shame them publicly on their Facebook page, or whatever it is the city decides to do. Now you've got your story. You did your due diligence. You did investigative work. Now, let's go back to option B. You have the evidence, and you already have the denial, and you already know you have nobody in the department or whatever you can trust because, look, they've already denied it. They've already lawyered up. They've already, roadblocked us at the AG's office. All right, let's turn the heat up. Let's just run the story with the information we have and let the public grill them and, roast them and demand answers. And then they'll show up at a city council meeting and say, this is what we found, or, you know what, we're opening an investigation, or these allegations are baseless, or whatever. You're going to eventually get to the same point. You're just going to get there through a different route. The point is, you don't break into the records office and steal records, is what I'm getting at. You do your fucking homework. You do your goddamn job. Now, these examples are obviously made up, but they're very similar to things I actually did as a reporter on stories I actually worked on. I'm not going to tell you which option I took. I'm just going to tell you I did my job. And yes, I got the corrupt individual fired and publicly shamed, and the money was found, and it was properly allocated where it belonged. I did my job, and there was, public repercussions. That's what you're supposed to do. You know what you're not supposed to do? Go to, I don't know, let's say you've got a tanning salon that's accused of being racist or whatever. You don't put on blackface and then go down to the tanning salon and try to prove that they're racist. You don't fucking do that. That's a no-no on so many reasons. Because that's deceitful, and that's illegal as a journalist. And it's unethical, and it's likely to get you fired. Not to mention banned from Facebook and canceled on social media. So don't fucking do that. Just don't. So you can do investigative journalism. You really, and I can't say can't do undercover journalism because you can, but if you're going to do undercover journalism, one, cover your ass, and two, do it by the book. Don't lie, don't deceive. Find somebody you trust to go and somebody in the company you trust to go ask questions and maybe take pictures and get you documents and bring them to you as evidence. So you have something to go to the organization you're accusing. You know what I mean? Like, find somebody you trust to help you gather information legally on their end so that you can go, all right, we have this. So you have something to show. That's how you do good journalism. But like I said, it starts with just point blank calling the accused and asking them for a statement. That's the literal first step. Step one is, hey, you've been accused of X, what do you have to say for yourself? You don't use those words, but you basically, that's what you're getting at. You want them to give you an explanation that can either A, satisfy us and be like, all right, that makes sense, then the accusation is false, or your answer is fishy, I don't like it, I have to dig a little deeper. That's how you do your job. Now, I'm going to go back to Ninja Turtles for a split second before I wrap this up. There's an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where the big boss, and I can't remember his name, the news editor, who was also depicted as the news anchor in more than one episode, which again is not typical, but it does happen. I have seen it happen, so I'm not going to say that's inaccurate, but it's not typical, but it can happen, especially at smaller markets that don't have the budget to have two people to hold that job. They have one person doing everything. That's understandable. That does happen. Fair enough. Now, not likely in New York City at, in the literal biggest market in the country, they probably have like different anchors for every newscast. Your news editor probably isn't sitting at the desk reading the news. Your news editor or news director is sitting in the office, usually yelling at people to do their jobs better. That is accurate. You're going to get yelled at, by the way. I forgot to mention that. They're going to tell you that day one on the job in Journalism 101 school as well. They're like, be prepared to get yelled at because you're going to get yelled at. But the news director wasn't satisfied. I think his name was Vernon or something like that. Wasn't satisfied with April covering up for the Ninja Turtles because he's convinced that they're trash. Which again, that's not good journalism. You should be unbiased. You should be like, let's find out the story. Let's not just be like, oh, I don't like them. They're evil. Let me prove it. So he goes undercover. But when he goes undercover, he does not go undercover as a television reporter. He goes undercover as a newspaper anchor or newspaper reporter. Which again, you can start out in newspapers and work your way into television. I know this because that's what I did. But if you've worked your way all the way up to news director, by the time you've become news director and you've done it for any amount of time, you're so far removed from beat reporter that you're going to be beyond rusty. You're not going to be a reliable beat reporter. You should not be in the field because you haven't done it for so long. You're out of the loop. You really shouldn't be going out into the field at that point. But also, you can't just accuse the Ninja Turtles of being bad guys and then go looking for evidence of this so you can get the story. Now, J. Jonah Jameson can because he runs a tabloid, and that's freedom of the press. You can make accusations all day long as you back it up with, well, this is just our opinion. We just believe this, and this is why we believe it. You can do that. Tabloids are legal. Are they ethical or moral? That's a whole other topic for a whole other day. So yes, J. Jonah Jameson can make up the news because he runs a tabloid newspaper, but Vernon at Channel 6 cannot because, well, he can, legally he can, but he shouldn't because that's not ethical. But I take that back. I don't know, because there's the fairness doctrine, and I don't know if that, because I think that only applies to broadcast station news, because the reasoning for that is you're using public airwaves, so you can't use public airwaves to, basically spread lies, which is why local, news, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, a Fox affiliate, not Fox News cable news, are usually less opinionated, more factual, whereas cable news, you can be as opinionated as you want because you're using your airwaves. You're not even using the airwaves. You're using cable or satellite or internet or whatever. Basically, it's not public access like the local station. So they can enforce the fairness doctrine on broadcast news, but they can't on newspapers or websites or cable TV stations. They can't, because that's not public utilities. You're using private enterprise, access to the, you're printing your own newspaper, or you're setting up your own server, or you're using AT&T's, fiber optic or whatever. So yeah, the government can't really regulate that because you have the Constitution protecting you from the government. But the FCC can regulate what goes over the airwaves because that's public airwaves. Anyone can access that. So that is a little bit dicey, a little bit different. So I don't know if Channel 6, WTRL, whatever their call letters are on the TMNT New York TV station, is a cable channel or a broadcast channel. I assume it's a broadcast channel because the Ninja Turtles pick it up in the sewer, but also I have to backtrack and say, well, no, it must be a cable channel because their antenna wouldn't be able to pick up a signal underground, so they would have to be using cable. But we never see any evidence of this, but also you would still have your broadcast channels available on the cable, so I don't know. I'm confused. I don't fucking know. The point is, what you see in movies and television of news reporters, journalists, as depicted, by and large, is not worth a shit. It's all fucking false. It's bullshit. None of it's real. That is not how the news business really works. That is not how news reporters really behave. And that is not how news anchors get the job news anchor. So a lot of times what you see on television is bullshit.